Well, it is. WEFM is SDG.
Minutes on to 11 o'clock here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You're locked on to WFM 99.9, the clean fresh sound, and this is your Isyotan program. Remember, Isyotan is an interactive program, so the numbers to call are 457 9997 if you're calling from a local landline, 532 9997 if you're calling from a digital cell phone, or you can call us or send us a message on WhatsApp at 457 9997. The It's Your Turn program is being hosted by Mr. Cecil Ryan, Mr. Philbert John, and Mr. Joel Providence. Good morning to you, Cecil.
Thank you, and good morning to you, Karen, and good morning to all our listeners on the WEFM platform and also on the Star Radio platform, and of course, my colleagues in studio, Philbert Pijan. Philbert?
Yes, Cecil, thank you and good morning. Good morning, Joel, Kieran. Good morning to all of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to all persons listening to WFM wherever you are. Pleasant good morning to you. And as usual, we're going to engage you in some interesting discussion on certain important issues. Joel?
Yeah, thank you, Pijan, Cecil, Kieran. Good morning, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Well, it's good to be back on another edition of this very important interactive radio program. I would also like to say a very special good morning to all here in St. Vincent and Grenadines, but I know as well that there are persons who are listening to the program in Canada, in the United States, in Barbados, as well as in Trinidad. So greetings as well to those persons from overseas who are also attuned to WEFM and the It's Your Turn program for this Sunday.
All right, and just to remind our listeners that last week, Professor Justin Robinson was down to be with us to discuss the 2025 budget for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but unfortunately he couldn't because of an emergency in his area, so where he lives in Antigua. But he will be with us this morning. We don't have him online yet, but for sure he will be with us. And so when he comes on, he will be leading our discussion this morning on the 2025 budget for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In the meantime, Joel, as usual, I think you may have one or two things.
Yes.
But be mindful that when he comes on,
Yeah,
we'll have
sure,
to
sure.
switch quick. Yes.
Well, okay, but Cecil, to begin with, I was at the St. Vincent Beach Stadium yesterday afternoon, and I was there as well on Friday evening. And I just wanted to make a brief comment about being there and a comment related to that. The development trials, and I think they had like relays yesterday. Again, there were it was very engaging, and I'm glad that I was there. I got there a bit late, but I think it was good to see the athletes, and I think that we have some very good young talent coming, and I do hope that, but I expect that they will get the support of the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines and not just their coaches and so on. But it was good to be there, and I enjoyed the outing. I just simply again would like to encourage as many persons as possible to attend these events, and I think it's virtually every Saturday afternoon. I believe it begins maybe around 1:30 or 2 o'clock or something like that. I'm not too sure, but that's the on Saturday afternoons for the rest of the month. So the persons who were in the stands were by and large persons who were involved in the activities in one way or another. The coaches, parents, teachers, and along with the participating athletes. So it's as if we are not being made aware, and I would really love to encourage as many persons to attend, and then persons in the neighborhood in particular. We have a first-class facility in the Diamond area, and the people from Carapan, Stubbs, Diamond itself, Enums, Prospect even, and so on. We certainly encourage you to go there. The events are there, and so on. I'm sure that there you may have a couple hours to spare on a Saturday afternoon. Please attend. I was there the Friday, the evening before on Friday, to do some walks. Not jog like you, Cecil, but
Well,
I can only walk.
You praising me? Yes, I'll talk about that.
Yeah, okay. But so I decided to see how many laps I can put in. I'm not ashamed to say that I don't do as well as some of the other persons I see walking around, but that's all right. Once I achieve my objective and that's fine. But on Friday there were only 3 or 4 persons beside myself there. And I really would love to encourage persons to take advantage of the facility that is there. It is not, just as far as I'm aware, just for the athletes, for athletic meets or when the football begins to be played there and so forth. But it's for all Vincentians, people from the community in particular, to use and enjoy the facility. And I asked myself, and I've started to think, well, what about the adults? What do they do when they get home on a Friday evening or Saturday? Is it that they're so engaged that they can't find time just to take a stroll and enjoy the facility and so forth? And I then thought about around St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where do people, the adults in particular, and the seniors, where do they go if they want to get out of the house, as we would say? I spending time in Latin America, different countries, Venezuela, Colombia, and so forth. Almost every town or small city, they have town squares. It's not so prevalent in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, I noticed, but there, in many other places, there's like a town square. And persons, I saw it in China as well, that you go to square, you walk around, you enjoy the scenery and so forth, it's therapeutic. And I recognize that in St. Vincent Grenadines, there's a few places that we don't have enough of these facilities and so forth. And I really would love to see the establishment of parks and boardwalks and so on. There's one established at Georgetown, Bronxtown, and so on some time ago and so on. So it's dual function in terms of being for coastal defense, and also there's a walk path and benches that persons can just take in the view that's available, presented to them, and so on. So we need to have more places where persons can go, and I said, because we can't be locked up in our homes all the time. I think it helps us all if we can get out and there are things for us to enjoy. And it shows the development of our country when you can actually have these. But even so, I'm still asking the question, when we put in these parks, these small parks, these squares, and so forth, whether or not we would still come out and enjoy them. Because here's the facility at St. Vincent Beach. It is there for the people of the South Windward, East St. George community in particular, but anyone else. But some persons just either don't have the time, or they're not aware, or they don't recall, or they just don't see the value in actually going there, exercise. Or they can just simply go and sit in the pavilion for a while and so forth. And that is one thing that I would like to say on that particular subject.
Before you go off on to the other point, I just want to, in response to the comments that you're making, I just want to endorse fully your comments on the use of the St. Vincent Beach Athletics Stadium facility. I was there yesterday as well, but earlier than you. Not as early as I normally go, but I was there, and there were not as many as I would like to see, but there were a few people there. And people come there in the morning, usually to walk. People of mainly adults and persons older are there early, very early in the morning. So I am. But not enough. More people should go out there and enjoy the facility. And I just want to share your own encouragement of people to come out and enjoy the facilities. They're there. They were put there for us, not only the athletes, for other non-athletes to go out and walk and if you can, jog, run, or whatever. Like yesterday, I saw Roger. Roger's a regular anyway.
Roger Young.
Yes, he's a regular. He was here yesterday, showing me up and all of that. But I did my little thing. But yes, I certainly endorse fully the point you're making. Just one little downside to the facility in that you would recall that some time ago I came on this program and did mention that I think the Prime Minister was on the program at the same time, that people still continue to let the animals go loose, and some of them go into the gate. Well, actually, I understand there's a gap in the fence, and the animals come through the gap and find themselves on the track, and it's not the best thing. I mean, going on in the dark, walking, and then you find yourself splash out on the carpet, because of animals, what they do on the track. And I would just want to again put out an appeal for the individual or individuals who have their cattle let loose. Be mindful that it's a facility that costs a lot of money and people go there to use it. So please, I mean, secure your animals. It's a simple thing as that,
Yes, I noticed the evidence.
Oh, you saw it.
I noticed the evidence of cows being there. But I asked the question, we have an expression from since I was a child where you say you want to go to look at football in Victoria Park. So some persons go from the riverside and used to jump the fence, right? Yeah. So I'm just saying that the cows can't jump the fence,
no,
right? So then therefore, this thing has been around. So can't we just do what is required to ensure that they don't get into the compound, because there's security.
Well, there's a gap in the fence,
but we can't just
but the gap needs to be closed. Yeah, precisely.
It's not a major issue. It's not a hard thing to do.
Matthew, I was told by the security last week that he has been informed that attempts will be made to close the gap, and I hope that comes through. But in the meantime, the gap is still there. Even when I was there, Thursday, as I was going in, he had like a herd of cattle in front of him, trying to get them out of the facility.
Because it's not like dogs and cats and so on, even trying, and those should not get in either. But but a cow and cattle as a whole, they're big animals.
Yeah,
and so on. So let's hope we can address that.
Oh, my just one thing.
Quickly, one point on the cows. The Prime Minister suggested shooting them. I don't
know how practical that is, because at that time in the morning, overnight.
I will never make an example of that. That would change the situation.
I believe so. But overnight, I mean, think of it. The police has to go there with a gun to shoot. I mean, in the darkness and so on. So I don't know if that's so practical. So in the day, that can happen. But in the night,
Can't we even just impound the cow, especially if they're within the confines of the stadium? Can't even the security how to impound these animals?
Well, I don't know. Arrangement would have to be made, including giving permission to the security or changing their role. I don't know.
Their job description
to do that. So the simplest thing is for the owner or owners to just secure the animals. In the some of them have chains and neck things. All they have to do is just tie them. I understand that someone who called this program before, he met me and he said he spoke with the owner, and the owner just cheeked him off, telling him why so-and-so don't go on, why so-and-so built the facility there. He needs to find a place to tie his animals and so on. I mean, that kind of ignorance. you know. So perhaps the best thing is pigeon is to perhaps shoot one.
No, it's not that necessarily this kind of the solution that I personally would opt for, but I actually in a sort of similar situation where the person said to me that his animals should be given priority over some road construction projects that were taking place in the Enums Makati area. And I couldn't understand the logic behind it.
Yeah, why should his animals be given priority?
But that's how it is. Maybe after a while, you're accustomed to be grazing the animal there for wherever on open pasture, just like for years, and then development takes place and so forth, and no longer have any place to graze your cattle, for instance, or your goat or your sheep, and then you feel that you're being hard done. And so on. So
it's a kind of selfishness that I can't. I have little tolerance for that. So
yeah.
Anyways, somebody's asking here about the state of the progress, of the grass on the football section of the thing. Okay. It looks, from my observation, the bad grass, quote unquote, are gone. It's just the required grass that's there, but it still needs to do some work.
Yes, I would think that it is about 95% ready for any
I don't know, Joel, next time you look at it, because my own thing is that the and I see Professor Robbins coming in. I see the surface looks a little bit uneven for me, and it needs to be pressed on all of that.
Or maybe they can put some more sand and so on. But it's progressing quite nicely.
Yeah, but it's basically ready.
Yeah,
it's basically ready. Just to cut it and press it, and that's it.
It's almost
yeah.
I just have 10 more seconds of comment. This one I want to, maybe I can leave it for next week, but I just want to ask the question: where are the male teachers?
All right, we come back to that.
So I will leave that for...
That's a big one.
That for next week.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I just wanted to slip in something quickly about my favorite topic, and yours, Cecil, West Indies cricket.
No, it ain't my favorite topic.
Well, I will endure it will stick with me to the end. And I just basically saying that I had to look at cricket this morning on YouTube. That is where it started cricket. And it's a disappointing thing to see the state of the pitch in Pakistan. But it's tomorrow is the third day, which more than likely will be the final day, because these matches tend to end in 2 or 3 days. And but West Indies has a fair chance to win this match and so forth. So we wish them well, and we just continue to rally around the West Indies. We all got to.
All right. Well, on that note, let's rally around another topic. Another person. As I was saying last week, we were to have had on with us Professor Justin Robinson, and he had an unfortunate situation where he couldn't. He informed us that he couldn't, but he's here. He's waiting for us to now introduce him and into the program. And Professor Robinson will be talking. We'll be discussing budget 2025. As folks who might not be aware, Professor Robinson is the principal of Five Islands campus on the University of the West Indies, and is based in Antigua. And so we're very pleased, as an associate of this program, as a matter of fact, we're very pleased to welcome with us this morning Professor Justin Marshall Robinson. Professor Robinson, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, hi, good morning, and thanks.
We have on your end. Maybe this your speaker or something. Is it possible for you to
Are you still getting that?
Yeah. Even as we're hearing ourselves, which means that your speaker is open. All right, so let's try again.
Are you hearing me loud and clear?
We're hearing you loud and clear, but as we speak, our voices are coming back to us.
Okay, that's interesting.
Maybe if you use a headphone.
Maybe a headset, you know.
If you turn
I don't
your
know. I
volume,
mean, is there anything you recommend I try?
yeah, turn your volume down a little bit, or if you can use a headphone.
Okay, just okay. So let me try that for 1 second.
Okay. Well, it's certainly good to have
Hey,
to see
Kira.
you and so on with us this morning. Last Sunday wasn't the best of times, as you indicated. And while he's doing that, Pijan, any quick thing you'd want to, while Professor Robinson's doing?
I am observing social media. There was something of a protest in North Leeward, and I'm trying to figure out why. At this stage, there's a protest in relation to the quarry. Significantly, the leader of the opposition was also present here. And what bothers me is the call of the protesters for Reno to remove themselves peacefully or be removed in pieces. That kind of rhetoric I find concerning.
Yeah. Peacefully or in pieces. Okay. I didn't see it, and
I'm looking forward to hearing some official statement on what is going on down there before we could engage in any extensive comment.
yeah, yeah, it's interesting. When you saw it yesterday, overnight,
I think it's on Thursday.
and I'm yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. So, no, we're still hearing the. Well, look, we're still hearing it. But Professor, maybe you just speak, and we will remain quiet, and then we would for a while anyway. We'll not have to deal with that. But it's good to see you. It's good to see you. Is everything good?
Yes, everything is settling down nicely. Thank you. And you guys were segueing away from two of my favorite topics, West Indies cricket. We hold out hope. A win is a win. And a very important topic, where are the male teachers? That's a whole program. Pijan, in our time, we think at St. Martin's when we were there together, there was a majority of male teachers.
Male teachers, yes.
Yes, our staff room was a very male environment. In fact, after school cricket among the teachers was a fairly big thing.
Same thing at the grammar school when I was there.
So when we meet to discuss that, Professor Robinson, maybe you might be, I don't know if you're willing to join us if it's convenient. That discussion, good to have you on.
I have one theory that we could look at at that point. High maintenance woman, it's difficult to maintain a woman on a teacher salary as a male. We could look at that when the time comes.
Professor, I presume you heard Pijan, didn't you hear it?
Yes, and I think that maybe goes to the heart of the problem. It was always a low-pay profession, but it carried high status. I think now it's a low-pay, low status. So the attractiveness to males in particular who have that provider role might be quite not so attractive.
Yes, okay. But yes, in the meantime, the budget 2025, I hope you've had a chance to follow up to look at parts of the presentation by Minister of Finance. the Honorable Camilo Gonzalez, and we would love to hear your own analysis and reaction to the budget, if not all of it, certain significant aspects of the budget, and the question that some of us may wish for you to address, particularly the role of the state or the role of the government in enabling certain expenditures and certain things to happen.
Yeah, and for me, this time, looking at the the budget here, what I found interesting is because of where I am currently based, I have had a chance to look at some other budgets, in particular, Antigua and Barbuda would have had their budget in December, along with St. Kitts, so two other Eastern countries. And at a pretty high level, I see two big differences, which may be in themselves major factors driving the SVG budget. So one, I would say the recovery from barrels. So I don't see any major items, well, virtually none in, say, the Antigua St. Kitts budget that deal with the recovery from a natural disaster. So I think in understanding this year's budget, one clearly has to factor in the impact of Hurricane Beryl and the need or the strategy around recovering from that. And the second element that I see coming from that somewhat comparative perspective is where some different Eastern Caribbean islands are in terms of their economic strategy and development. So I operate every day in Antigua and Barbuda, close proximity, St. Kitts. I still report half of my portfolio in Barbados, and I'm required to go up to Mona Campus, Jamaica as headquarters. And what I see there are 4 Caribbean countries, 2 of them, well, Jamaica much larger, Barbados not in the EC, St. Kitts and Antigua, where they are 20 years into the development of their infrastructure around tourism and hospitality. So cruise facilities, hotels, the whole infrastructure around tourism and hospitality has been built out and operational, and they are doing tweaks and upgrades. Whereas SVG is almost at a very infant takeoff stage in building out that tourism infrastructure on mainland St. Vincent. And I see those as 2 quite significant differentiating factors between St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a number of the other Eastern Caribbean, and are quite important in understanding and interpreting the budget. So, for example, if we look at the expenditure side of the budget, compared to the prior fiscal year, we certainly see a significant amount of expenditure really programmed there. But if we look at the expenditure, well, 1.3 billion in expenditure. A significant, so some key budgetary measures, we have 62.75 million allocated to the Hurricane Beryl in terms of to repair and rebuild 1,000 homes. The Berry project, 170 million, the Beryl Emergency Resilient Recovery Project. So really you have 230, let's say 240 million of the expenditure that is built around the recovery from Hurricane Beryl, which is certainly something that is different for SVG than other. I certainly commend the recovery and the attempt to rehabilitate and recover from Hurricane Beryl. I think anybody studying economics, finance in the region, the vulnerability to natural disasters, your capacity to have years of development roll back in one hurricane, earthquake, and so on. In terms of these projects, I certainly don't have a difficulty with this expenditure as an important, critical, I would even say necessary response to the disaster. I think where the issue is going to come really is the project management and execution. Because it's certainly it's a very ambitious project. And I certainly would not be critical of the attempts to finance this recovery and do so in a timely manner. Infrastructure repair, small business recovery, and the housing. The real challenge I see, which needs to be carefully managed, is really that project management, project execution element, which can really it can really destroy the best efforts and the best intentions if careful effort isn't really paid and attention paid towards how you execute these projects in a timely manner, on budget, that the work is done in a way that we don't feel that, which shirt you wear determines who gets the work and so on. I think these are the things really that we have to manage as we seek to really execute this critical project. So the execution risks. I think the scale of the proposed projects demand robust planning and management to avoid delays and cost overruns. And I guess I pause there for any reaction for any of my panelists there.
Yes.
Because I see that as the big story on the expenditure side, really the barrel recovery expenditure, which I think is fine. I think it's important, critical, if not necessary. But the scale of the projects, the ambition, it really requires really robust project management, planning, and execution. So that execution risk I see as critical there.
How critical do you see the external environment, changes in global affairs?
Yeah, so that's an important backdrop. And I think interestingly, the economic strategy in SVG to some extent, I think, makes it better prepared for what I see as the emerging global environment than many countries. In a sense, I'm of the view that we are moving to, I guess, what we call a multipolar world. And, those of us who do economic and financial history, we sort of find this quite interesting in a way. People alive today, we know the Cold War. I mean, we live in a world that has been dominated by the US and the North Atlantic countries. People talk about the American century. So we've grown up in a very US and to a lesser extent Eurocentric world where that's where the money has been, that's where all the action, everything has been, so to speak. Our natural links are with that world because of geographic proximity. We speak the language. If there's an earthquake in China, right, Joel? I mean, we might look at it out of curiosity, but I don't really know nobody in Beijing. I mean, but if there's an earthquake in the US, I perk up. I mean, I had friends who were in the World Trade Center building when it got bombed. I mean, the people I know who.
I have a neighbor.
Right. So those are our natural links, but we are really living, I think, in a shift that for economic and financial historians harks back to the world that existed before, say, 1400. So when I studied economic history in school, they sort of were told that before 1400, around there, before the Industrial Revolution, the global economy, you could say, was roughly China was the dominant economy, followed by India. And then you had the Arabian world, that's where a lot of money was, and Europe was there. Now, Europe industrialized and dominated. So now we are moving back to a multipolar world. And interestingly, I think SVG has been seeking to negotiate, to manage relationships with many different players in the globe. In a sense, has not necessarily been as tied into that North Atlantic world as, say, Barbados. I mean, I spent most of my career in Barbados. If we look at the Mia Motley administration, for example, Mia has staked, I would say, 95% of our administration on working with those multilateral institutions, World Bank, IMF, IDB. With the stance we see now in the US is, what role is that whole multilateral system going to have in the world? So I think the global factors, Pijan, are always important for us, but I think we are well positioned in how we manage that because we have already been speaking to everyone. I mean, in a sense, I think SVG has probably applied what Errol Barrow said more than Barbados, where he said, friends of all, but satellites of none.
Important question. I think that disasters, natural disasters, are almost a certainty. No, more than any time. Do you observe anything in the budget that contribute to our resilience significantly in dealing with these climatic events?
Yeah, I think a very important point. And so when I speak to the execution risks, as we rebuild these houses, as we rebuild the infrastructure, as we build out new infrastructure, I think it's going to be absolutely critical that resilience is built into these projects, that this is an opportunity to create new homes that, you know, that you have the solar, water, heating, the different renewable energy, sustainability built into these projects from the outset, because we have a lot of infrastructure that was built a long time ago when this wasn't the issue. And as any of us know, when you're trying to rework our old house, is the most trouble. So sometimes we have an opportunity here now to really build that resilience into this new build out after Beryl, as well as the significant infrastructure development that is going into SVG as we build out a modern tourism industry on mainland St. Vincent. So again, I think the necessary and ambitious Beryl spend in the budget, if we don't execute these projects and get it done on budget and on time, and build in resiliency into these projects, then I think a lot of the good that could come of it would have been lost.
Okay, I just want to follow up on Pijan's question. Earlier on, we spoke about project management and the criticality of planning and so forth. And the challenge to planning comes when we find ourselves in an emergency situation when these disasters occur. It's not like in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s when a hurricane passed through once every 20 years. or but let's say in this century, we have probably had at least 12, 13 major environmental issues to deal with. So I'm speaking on the question of institutional capacity. And I want to ask the question as to whether or not there's an opportunity to combine the resources of, say, the OECD. So that if there's a particular disaster, St. Vincent and Grenada, that there are resources available in Antigua and St. Kitts to assist in St. Vincent at a moment's notice, and vice versa.
Well, I see that as quite critical in terms of disaster response, and another how we react in the immediate aftermath of a disaster where there's a critical need on the ground. And entities like the RSS and other forms of functional cooperation across the EC are quite critical because of the nature of the disaster, the capacity in the affected island will not be able to be mobilized in a rapid manner. And the capacity to have it come in from a neighboring island and so on is quite critical. But in terms of the longer term rebuilding, so you have the crisis effect, houses get destroyed, infrastructure get destroyed. There's kind of the immediate response to get life functional in a short term. And I certainly agree with you about the critical role for the regional functional cooperation. But in terms of that longer term rebuild, how do we build back these houses then? Do we just put back up a set of houses to get houses there? Or do we build houses now that are more resilient, that are really built with storms in mind? So I see it as kind of two separate aspects, the sort of immediate response, but the longer term build for resilience. And for some of the work I've done,
I think we just lost in the maybe it's internet. We'll try to stay.
I thought I lost you guys for a minute there.
We did. In fact, you were just about beginning this. I think I said some of the work. I think that's where we.
Can you guys still hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes,
now.
we can.
You're not hearing us?
Okay, no, yeah. So I thought I lost you guys for a minute. Were you still hearing me?
We are
Yes.
Okay. I guess I saw the buffering on the screen.
We were not hearing you. In fact,
Right. So I was responding to Joel's comment and saying he's making a very important point in terms of the short-term, immediate disaster response, where that regional cooperation is critical because the resources in the affected island may have been badly affected by the very disaster. So the capacity to have that come in from a neighboring island, I think, is critical, and we need to invest in that. But then there's how do you build back? I mean, the simple phrase is to build back better, build back with resilience in mind. Because I think a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of construction in SVG was never really planned. Everybody get a piece of land, you put up your structure on it and so on. How do you build with evacuation in mind? How do you harvest water, area, things like that? So I think there's a capacity and an opportunity now that we are rebuilding and doing some new infrastructure to build with that in mind.
But there's the urgency to build back. Does that sacrifice
The better?
quality?
And again, I mean, I don't know that better sometimes means more expensive or more involved. It's really building with resiliency in mind. Okay, if we are to build back, how do we do these structures in a way that helps us to manage floodwaters better?
Or to get back a roof over the head in the quickest time possible. Would that be the impulse to cut corners?
Of course, so I think the impulse is there. But given what Joel was saying, these things are not coming every 20 years. So when you put it back up quick, it's not like you might have 20 years before it gets tested again. Because we have to expect these as frequent events, then I think we have to hold the pressure really and build back better, because there's a good chance that the structure you put up or the structures are going to be tested again in very short time.
Right.
I just wanted to follow up on the question and your answer short while ago. If we were to take a regional approach, let's say from the OECS, and there's a disaster requiring the skills of engineers and so on from St. Vincent attached to the Ministry of Transport and Local Transport, for example, and they needed to send some persons up to Antigua or St. Kitts, who would bear that cost? And therefore, should each member of the OECS put in their budget a figure for regional disaster as much as it should for national disaster?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting point. Requires some thought. I mean, I think we have our regional structures and the extent to which, you have a CDB, you have the CRIF and other disaster management, and the extent to which we can work through those. But that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about something like that, but it's certainly worth some thought, Joel, in terms of having that capacity built in there for that regional response. I mean, in the OECS, we do have easy movement of labor, so that there are really no restrictions in that sense. But in terms of who bears the cost, so that's an interesting policy angle for consideration. Now, sorry, go ahead.
Well, before we're focusing on Beryl and the consequences of Beryl and so on, and for the budget and so forth, I wanted to go back to tourism if we have not exhausted the Beryl Act.
Right, yeah, because again, in terms of the Beryl, I kind of stress that because it's a big chunk of expenditure in the budget, and it's one of the issues that St. Vincent is dealing with as distinct from other nations having to finance that. Yeah, so you said you had a question around the tourism side?
Yes, well, you heard during the budget the statement made by the Minister of Finance initially, and then supported or repeated or reiterated by the Minister of Tourism regarding the increase in numbers of visitors, stay-over visitors in Wendy. And we're making significant strides. So the whole strategic switch to focusing on developing St. Vincent, the mainland, as a tourism destination, I think is beginning to pay dividends. Of course, naturally, it started with the investment in the AIA airport and other things along those lines. But are you, based on, I don't know if you had a chance to give a deep dive into the budget in terms of tourism, as to see where we are and what else is needed. There's monies for the Marriott Hotel at Mount Twin, and there's some other projects and so on linked with tourism that the government has pledged to undertake and so on. I think that it's an important trust. I am made to understand right now that the numbers at the Scandals Resort, they're pretty much running at 90% capacity right now. It could be 90% may mean 600 persons staying there for whatever number of days, whatever is the average stay, and that is significant. And if we have 2 or 3 facilities, not necessarily at a Sanders level, if you want to call Sanders at 5-star, 4-star, but if we have a couple at 3-star and so forth, that you mentioned about the 20 years and so on. I can see that our catch up or that the growth in our tourism could be accelerated to the point that it can narrow the gap in a matter of a few years between where we are and the other islands or territories in the Caribbean. So I just wonder if you comment, first of all, if it's the right approach to make the kind of investment in that's the government, and tying back with Cecil's comment about the role of the state, because I don't think an individual at a national level, local level, that anyone would want to take on the kind of investments that any private sector entity would take on the investment in a facility such as the Marriott, 250 plus rooms and so forth. And then we have other things to link with that we have to do. And if we want to go to build like conference in conference type tourism and so forth, we have to expand on our room stock. We have to do a number of things. We have to have conference facilities and so forth. We have to expand for the cruise ships, more and more cruise ships and so on will come. I think that is only the government, it's only the state that can really take on some of these things and so forth, because Marriott by itself not going to build a hotel. They can manage, they can run, they can say, oh, it has to be an agreement with someone else, but they're not going to do it. So the state has to do it. But I don't know, based on what was mentioned in the budget, whether or not you think that we are on the right track and that we will get the dividends in short order and where we can actually see a sort of a catch up, even though while the other destinations in the Caribbean, they too will continue to invest in their own facilities.
Oh, I don't think we're hearing. Professor Robinson, we're not hearing you. We're not hearing you.
Okay, are you hearing me now?
Now we're hearing you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So thanks for that, Joel. Because in terms of the budget, I think it's difficult to understand the budget, compare it, and look at the metrics without factoring in Beryl and the attempt of SVG to build out this tourism infrastructure on the mainland. Because as a financial analyst, you look at the budget in many ways. The first thing would jump out at you is a larger deficit.
Okay.
Increasing debt, the debt to GDP ratio at 83%. These are the high level metrics that would jump out at you as a financial analyst and drive some discussion.
It's almost 93% though.
Right. So across the Eastern Caribbean, ECCB, there's this notion. And the kind of international benchmark is you want to be 60% debt to GDP. So why is St. Vincent significantly out of whack at this point? And so I would say the recovery from Beryl. And secondly, we are in this phase. So the strategy, we are in this phase of rapidly building out the infrastructure for this tourism industry on mainland St. Vincent. One key element of that is having the room stock. So if you're going to host visitors, there have to be places to put them. I think Sandals is always controversial in terms of its business model, etc. I tend to support Sandals type projects because you see, so quite often when we think of tourism, right, Cecil, we think of the demand side. What does SVG have to offer? The beaches, the volcano, and so on. But a lot of research shows that one of the main factors that determine where people go on holiday is their access to a direct flight or the number of connections. So that's supply side. How easy it is to get there. And if you follow it, airlift capacity follows Sandals. Sandals has a fantastic marketing machinery. They fill their rooms, and because they're filling their rooms, they help drive the airlift into your country. So I think one of the big benefits of Sandals is because of their capacity to fill their rooms. they play a big role in making sure you get more of that airlift, which is one of the key variables in terms of tourists choosing where to go. Now, clearly, sandals is not everybody is like Pijana and can afford sandals. It's not for most of us pockets. So,
I
agree. My sister lived in Rillen Hill, so I could look over at the hotel. so that's what I. So clearly, you need other product. You need business conference hotels. So even a place like Antigua, for example, now that they have a campus here, one of their big needs is the Marriott type hotels. Antigua has big resorts at the lower end, but nothing in the middle. So when we're having UWI conference, there's a shortage of that kind of business person hotel, somebody in and out. So building out that capacity. Also, what people have to do while they're on the ground. And as a Vincentian who spent a lot of time in Barbados, one of the things that always struck me, I'm not a tourism expert by any means, but my sort of everyday sense was Barbados don't really have anything that St. Vincent don't have. And in many ways, we have more, but what they have is packaged and sold very well. And I think that's something I would like to see entrepreneurs and the state invest in. When you have popular beaches and other things like that, we have young children, older people, families, so things like bathroom facilities, beach facilities, how well places are kept and so on. So what are the attractions in St. Vincent? And how amenable they are to a range of people. Do they have basic bathroom facilities that are well kept? Can you get a drink while you are there? Is there even like a nominal entrance fee to fund the upkeep of the place? Sometimes going to some of our attractions in St. Vincent is really growing on a hike and you really, it can be a little rough. So I think to answer your question, Joel, I think the investments are correct. What I would want to suggest or advise the government think about is that if at this stage the government is the one taking the risk, what they should be planning at this stage really is take the risk, get it off the ground, but what is the exit strategy? Because if you take it to a certain level that the private sector is now seeing the success and they are now willing to come in and make the investment, then the state can exit. It can use those funds to pay down some of the debt it incurred initially, or it can invest in other things. It can remain a shareholder and collect dividends and so on. But I think it's important, and I am comfortable with the view that for a number of these projects at this stage, SVG, new destination in a crowded marketplace tourism, the state probably has to take that risk capital. But I would want to urge and advise the state that even at this stage to be thinking of an exit strategy.
I think Finance Minister Camila Gonzalez spoke to that very issue at the handing over ceremony of the Holiday Inn Express and Suites at Diamond, that the state would seek to exit at some point, or certainly divest part of its shares in that facility. We haven't heard the plan involved as yet, but I trust that is something that they'll move to quickly, and some of that funds could help to deal with the Marriott and so on at Mount Twin.
Yeah, so along with that, so in some ways, my coming away from the budget, I was quite pleased with the budget. I think I like to, with a budget, I want to see where is the government trying to take the country. To me, that really is in a lot of ways, for me, the importance of the budget. A country is at a particular point in time. Where does the government want to take the country? And in the budget, I thought I saw a very clear strategy of where the government is trying to take the country. And I think in a democracy, it is very important and useful to have a very good debate about that. And different parties have different views and so on. And that's what we want. It's clear that the government is, one, trying to do a recovery from burial and fund that. They're seeking to build out the tourism infrastructure on mainland St. Vincent. They're seeking to continue their investment in the social sector. So that's another key part of that budget. So I am quite comfortable and supportive of that general strategic direction. What I would want to see alongside that, as I mentioned earlier, was that emphasis on project execution. So, come next budget, I would want to be holding the government to the fire. Where are we with these projects? But also, given that these projects have led to a growth in the deficit, an increase in debt and the debt to GDP ratio, I think it's also very important for the government to lay out a very clear debt sustainability strategy. What is the strategy for getting to 60-70% debt to GDP by a particular date? So I think that's a very important element that needs to be in the mix, because I accept that these investments are critical for driving the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and that they require this increase in the absolute level of debt and the debt to GDP. So I accept that, and I am comfortable with that, and I can endorse that approach. But I think critical alongside that would be laying out a clear fiscal strategy in terms of debt sustainability. We need a very clear strategy for long-term fiscal health. How are we going to get down to the debt levels and debt to GDP that we would really like to see?
Professor Robinson, can you tell us how does SVG compare with other OECS, even other CARICOM countries with respect to debt to GDP ratio? Right.
So the current ratio in the budget is what? Somebody remind me. What's that number?
I think it's about 93%.
So that's definitely on the high end. St. Kitts is about 56%, 57% of GDP. Antigua, just this budget, they would have really come in around 60% of GDP. Barbados is the highest, I think, in the Caribbean at this point at 112%, and they have made a lot of strides. And that's what I mean by the clear fiscal strategy. A country gets to a debt level at a particular point in time. No serious policymaker accepts or takes the view that you're going to move it from 90 to 60 in 1 year. So when Barbados, for example, the most recent, and that's like some people see it as a very good case study in debt management. When Mayor Motley came to power in 2018, the debt to GDP was around 175%. And what the cornerstone of their program was, they laid out a clear strategy to get to a debt to GDP ratio of 60% by the year 2035. And that's quite often what lending institutions, policymakers, and so on want to see, is a clear strategy. So certainly 93% debt to GDP would put us among the highest in the EC. We are lower than Barbados, closer to the Jamaica level. So it's certainly a high debt to GDP. But I think at this stage, I am not troubled by the level of the debt to GDP, because the debt being incurred that has pushed up the debt to GDP is not consumption-driven debt. We've had this massive port project. We are now doing the barrel rebuild, and there are a number of hotel-driven type infrastructure investments. So the debt has been incurred to build capacity. What I think is critical then is that these investments are executed in a smooth manner so we can begin to get the benefits of the investment, but also that the state lays out a clear strategy, a clear fiscal strategy to get to that debt to GDP target by a certain date. And we always advise that you work back. If you set a date, 15 years from now, you want to get to 60% GDP, debt to GDP. What level of primary balance surplus you are going to need to run to stay on that trajectory given your GDP forecast? And you then work back. So things like the exit strategy from some of these investments would be a critical part of that, divesting all or some of it, and those funds going into a debt service and account and so on. So I think many people would be comfortable with the investments that have been made that have led to the level of debt. What is critical is that the investments are executed efficiently so that we get the GDP growth that the investments were meant to get to. But also critical that there's a very clear and convincing fiscal plan to get to that debt to GDP ratio. And I think it's, given the level of debt, I think it's important and urgent that the state lay that out quite clearly.
What about the fact of the percentage of the recurrent budget that has to be dedicated towards servicing the debt? I think it's maybe some in the vicinity of 27 to 28% of the recurrent budget goes towards servicing the debt. Is that reasonable?
I think that's high. That's certainly high. We don't like to see interest service really get a lot more than 15-20% of GDP. It's acceptable in the short term because in a sense, these investments are lumpy. You can't build the port in phases, So you have to get that. So it's not a linear thing that you can phase. They are lumpy. You're gonna get that surge in debt, and then you have to service the interest on the debt. It's really laying out that trajectory. Does the government need a strategy on the revenue side in terms of expanding government revenues? How do you grow that revenue base? Maybe a critical thing, but again, we would really want to see, and I think that's something that probably needs a bit of a deeper look at in terms of how you can broaden the revenue streams. We are building out the tourism sector. Some of the debt is for that. What are some of the levies and so on? I mean, I know, like being here in Antigua, they're quite aggressive with the cruise ships and the head taxes and those other elements, really. Because ideally, you want to broaden your revenue stream in a way that doesn't burden your local population.
Yeah, for no higher to locals. But there are levies, for example, that are imposed at the hotel level for visitors who are staying at the hotels. I can't remember what figure it is. It's mainly and it's called an environmental levy. I think it's $3 or something like that. I can't remember what the figure is per person. But there are opportunities along those lines as well to raise revenue.
Yeah, I'm fully agree. So I think in terms of, so I said it needs a clear fiscal strategy. A key element of that, what is your strategy for growing the revenues? Now, clearly, you have these transaction taxes like value-added tax and others. if you get the growth, then that revenue will also grow. But do we need to do more in particular areas? And ideally, if you can grow your revenues without imposing levies on your local population, which already feels that their dollar isn't stretching anywhere at all in the supermarket and so on. So again, if you're building out these tourism infrastructure, that's a big part of your debt. What kind of levies you get there? How aggressive are you in collecting them? Are you giving too many exemptions? So we need to close loopholes. Some of these tourism and other sites. What are the entrance fees and other things? And can you charge higher prices to visitors and so on? So, what is your strategy on the revenue side is a critical element.
Well, there could be areas as well, if I may suggest, for charge or cost reduction in some areas. For example, there's the airline revenue guarantee, and depends on what is negotiated. Is that if the load factor can be so high based on your marketing activity, room stock, etc., then that airline revenue cost should go down by a significant amount, millions.
Yeah, so the devil is always in the details of those. And I think at the stage we are, where we are really now beginning to develop that mainland SVG brand, I have a sense that maybe those it might still be a few years before we might be able to roll back on some of those. But any state has to have a keen eye on, I am making these investments in these facilities. What are the capacities to generate revenues from these facilities and to broaden the tax base generally? I mean, economists speak a lot about tax expenditures, where we have, because I often, Cecil, I'm always of the view that on the revenue side, your first job is to do a better job of collecting the taxes you already have on the books. Driving your tax compliance, I think, is critical in terms of collecting the taxes you have on the books. And it doesn't make sense that you have the taxes on the books and you're giving 1,000,001 exemptions here and there, and you are not collecting. So really, that effort on the tax side, I think, is critical on the compliance side, but also looking for new areas where you can generate additional revenue. And taxes we can get on foreigners are really the ideal ones.
Is there any way we could measure tax collected in relation to capacity? Are the amongst possible?
Yes, so I mean, inland revenue should have a very, inland revenue will know how many people we have employed, the tax take, properties, the value of properties, what kind of taxes you can collect on that, and so on. So I think the tax authorities always have a very good sense of the taxes that are due and should be collected. I think the challenge comes, one, from capacity. Are these departments adequately resourced to do their jobs? And that may be an area, do they have the necessary expertise to do their jobs? And also, are there ways we can make it easier for people to pay their taxes, sometimes I see people lining up to pay the government and in hot sun and thing. I mean, is that what you really want? You want to make this as easy and as seamless as possible. So I think really the capacity and also the will, somebody is bringing in something and somebody knows somebody and you get a waiver. A business person is doing a big project, stuff is coming in and they make an application. They get waivers. This is very popular in a lot of this tourism and infrastructure development. And I'm always intrigued that, a guy has the money to bring in a high-end vehicle, but he can't pay the duty, you know. A guy is building a massive $1 million project, but he can't pay for the stuff to come in. I think we have to be very sensible and pragmatic, because there's a lot of research, P. John, about these so-called tax expenditures, where a significant chunk of funds that should be going into the treasury are voluntarily given away on a regular basis. We choose not to collect it. So I think it's the capacity, the will, and the infrastructure, making it easy. A lot of people, we still have a lot of cash in St. Vincent, but a big chunk of your taxpayers are quite digital, and they're accustomed to paying a lot of things online, etc. The extent to which we can make it easier for people to meet their obligations to the state. I think these are very, very important investments that need to be made.
Gentlemen, we want to open up. I'm sure a number of persons who are listening and may have questions, so we would invite persons who wish to ask questions of Professor Robinson to call us. 457-9997 is the number. You can reach us there directly, or use that as the WhatsApp number. You can send us a WhatsApp message, and we would be able to share that message with Professor Robinson. So if you wish to, please do that now, because in a little while, I suspect, Professor Robinson, I suspect Prime Minister might be listening, and he may wish to later on call into the program. But in the meantime, we would want to encourage persons who are listening to please, if you wish to, call us now or send us a message or WhatsApp message. Yeah, Joel, I noticed you came forward, no?
I was going to ask a question in relation to the repatriation of regional investors and so on, and have a presence in these islands, and to what extent should their profits be taxed? Should there be a difference between how you tax the profits of FDI as opposed to LDI?
Yeah, very, very important question, because we had the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute in Mona had a public lecture by Professor Figaro, I think on Wednesday, and he was making a very important point in that area. He says almost every policy that Western economists have criticized China about have been some of those policies that are now driving this powerful Chinese economic machine. So the Chinese never really allowed 100% foreign ownership through FDI. If you came in, you needed a local partner, locals had to be investment, it had to be players along with it. They were very interested in the technology transfer, not just the money. Taxes, again, differential taxes on foreign investors and so on. These are a lot of measures that have been employed, China, India, that have been highly criticized by Western economists, which have basically said provide a flat playing field, You don't want to have any discrimination. So again, I think these are very interesting ideas, Joel. Joel, you sound like you're auditioning for Minister of Finance. You seem to have to present your own alternative budget with these very interesting policies. But certainly, that knowledge transfers. One of the things I really hope that comes out of Vincentians working like in sandals is that getting exposed to that international franchise, that they can take that expertise and go and do their own thing down the road. that knowledge transfer. How do you run a world-class hospitality facility? Florists and other people doing lawns and all the people doing that maintenance around sandals, being exposed to the requirements of that world-class provider, that they can now take that into other aspects. I see so many chefs and other people in Barbados who are taking their experience they got in hotels and are starting their own things. And you can go to some rum shops and thing in Barbados and get fantastic meals and places you see on the side of it. And these are people who have taken their years of expertise and have gone. So that knowledge transfer. I think one of our problems in the region is we've had FDI, but the money come in, the money go back out. What we haven't really gotten, because if the foreign investors bring their money in, they bring it in with the intention of being able to take out more than they brought in. They would be irrational to do otherwise, Joe.
Yes, agreed.
It's going to happen over time. So that knowledge, expertise transfer is quite often what drives growth and development, and we've not focused enough on that. So you're not in Sandals just to get a lifetime job in Sandals forever and be a salaried employee, but it's to get some of that expertise and take it on your own and become an owner, manager, investor, and that's what drives development, that knowledge transfer.
Yes, I support that to a great deal. I find sometimes that we may focus on FDI and entities that are investing 100 million, 150 million, and so forth. And then we'll focus on small business, those that are seeking to invest or get grant or loan facilities that allow them to spend 150,000 or 300,000. But somewhere in the middle, those ventures that may require initial capital outlay of 5 million, 6 million, 7 million, 8 million. That's where we have a problem, and it's maybe just the reserve of persons who are into the ordinary retail trade and wholesale distributive business. But there are areas in there in which we can actually help to build the tourism product and so forth, and where you can actually have locals partnering maybe with the state initially, and then the state can divest afterwards. And it might be a $5 million investment, and the locals might put in $1 million or something of the sort. And I think there's an opening there, which I think that we should spend considerably more time. I have a question. I think there was a caller. I have a question for you, Professor Robinson. It has to do with, it's on the manufacturing side. It's on agro-processing and government policy. It's, we've had situations in Barbados and in St. Lucia where the government said that I think poultry virtually has to be, you have to get a special license to import poultry into Barbados. In St. Lucia, I think you had to get to import poultry into St. Lucia. You had to show evidence that 35% or so of your, say, if you're into the distributive trade, would be grown locally in St. Lucia. To some extent, it drove up the price of the price of poultry or chicken or whatever it is to the local consumer. Maybe I don't know how many persons were employed and how it benefited the economy overall. And you would be aware of the problems that they had in Barbados a few months ago, where they couldn't get eggs and so forth, and it was a problem. And chicken, you couldn't get chicken as well, and so forth. And the government of Barbados had to issue license and so on. I just want to ask you a question, whether or not do you see merit in that type of policy where you twin the importation of products with the support for or the development of local enterprises, especially those in manufacturing or agro-processing?
I think it's a very important and interesting question. The ordinary citizen experiences the economy primarily in the supermarket or wherever they shop. I think policies that will significantly increase the cost to them, I think we have to be very careful. Because when I look at the cost of, say, chicken at the retail level in Barbados, which has this policy, and Barbados has a highly protected local chicken market. The local chicken industry is very highly protected. And it's a significant local industry. A number of people are employed in it and so on. So there is that benefit. But the flip side of that is chicken in Barbados is sometimes twice as expensive as where I am here in Antigua. And chicken is a staple. Now, the approach I tend to think, I don't tend to support that except in some very targeted areas. What I would want to encourage is if the focus there is say the tourist industry, for example, and so on, how do you market the local chicken as being healthier? It's fresher, it's not frozen. And there is a growing market for that among tourists and locals, even if they have to pay a bit more for it. That this is not. I mean, I virtually don't buy chicken sometimes because I have a feeling that the chicken we eat now has become a distant cousin of the chicken of before, with all the processing and etc. And there's a big interest in that. This thing is farm raised and so on. So, and the local population has gone through a significant inflationary spiral. The cost of living is higher. I was in St. Vincent a bit in January, and I know that there were two very noticeable things. I would say one was the uptick in tourism. I could see, you could see it if you had never thought about it. You really could see that tourism on mainland St. Vincent, but also that things cost more than they normally cost in St. Vincent historically. So I'll be very wary of that. But I think the way to get there is marketing. Persons across the world are increasingly health conscious. They're increasingly aware of the benefits of fresh foods and so on. And I think that's the area that we need to push, that this is locally raised produce. It's been fed. It's organic. It doesn't have all these steroids and etc. And that can be very appealing to tourists and be willing, and the capacity to command a premium price. But I think this is a difficult moment to justify increasing the cost of a staple like chicken to the local population. I think policymakers have to do politics too. That would be politically very risky.
Especially in 2025.
In St. Vincent.
In St. Vincent. Or Trinidad.
Yes.
Yeah, you.
All right. So in the meantime, I want to remind persons, if they wish to interact with Professor Robinson and the panelists here, the number to call is 457-9997. You can call us, use that number to get us straight, or via WhatsApp, or send us a message on WhatsApp through the same number. Yeah, Joel.
No, I just wanted to follow that last comment Professor Robinson made and so on about differentiating your product. If it's fresh and everything like that in terms of chicken and so on. The hotels and so on, or the supermarkets not going to be able to sell fresh unless they buy locally.
Before we have a call, let's take the call. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
My name is Jensen John.
Okay. Jensen?
Yes. What I'd like you to do, the abbreviation that you use, sometimes we can't take it for granted that everybody understands.
Give an example of one used this morning. Give one this morning. FDI?
Yes.
Yes. Foreign direct investment. But let me turn over to Professor Robinson. Professor Robinson.
Thank you.
Did you hear the question?
No, sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, okay. He called to say that sometimes some of the abbreviations used not necessarily familiar to listeners, and he mentioned FDI, for example. So
I think there are two things that we spoke about. One is the debt to GDP. So GDP gross domestic product, which is really what is the size of the economy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines or any country. So GDP, gross domestic product. You're actually trying to put a dollar value on the goods and services produced in a country in a period of time. The debt, well, that's the total amount of money owed by the government or the state. And we think it's important to look at the debt to GDP rather than just the actual amount of debt. Because the other is, how much debt can it carry? You know, $100,000 in debt is a huge burden for a primary school teacher. But $100,000 in debt is nothing to a bank manager in terms of his total portfolio. So with the debt to GDP, we're saying, you know, looking at the total debt by itself might not tell you that much. But what is the debt relative to the size of the economy? And that's the number people tend to focus on. So Joel spoke about, see, if you have debt, what percentage of the government revenue goes to pay debt? Because that's something we pay a lot of attention to, because, you know, the government collects taxes. You would like that money to go on roads, schools, things that drive the country forward. You don't want too much of that going to the creditors. So you take a look at that. Foreign direct investment. So that's Sandals is the classic example of that. Investors who from outside St. Vincent, they put up their money and they invest. They build a hotel. And even things we don't think of foreign direct investment now were at the start, they've become so local. So like Courts. Courts is not a Vincentian company. But at some point, some foreign investors came in and made that investment. Republic Bank. These are all different forms of foreign investment. What we were saying, these investors bring in their money. What are they investing for? They want to make a return. They don't live in St. Vincent, so when they get their money, they want to take it back out. Which again is why we were stressing the importance of that knowledge transfer. You know, these people working in the banks and so on, learning international banking, can really come and upgrade our credit union sector, transform those skills into local lending, or they could start an online payment platform in St. Vincent based on their experience in there. That knowledge transfer is absolutely critical for sustainable economic growth and development.
Thanks. Joel, you were coming in just now?
Yeah, I just I wanted to make a comment about hotel, but just something that came to mind. I wanted Professor Ram
again.
Yeah, no caller. Okay,
yes. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, good evening, brother Cecil, Pijan, and Joel, and Professor Robertson, most foremost. Bungo Shafke here. Professor Robertson, it's good to have you on. I missed you last week, but you're here now. Professor Robertson, you in the last budget, I think you had mentioned something about the Grenadines, right? The development of the Grenadines and the contribution they make towards the GDP of the country and so forth, right? I'm asking a question to you, Professor. Seeing that we have the recent development of the hurricane and so forth, right? Or like a setback on certain things, but progression is taking place, at least, you know, step by step. I'm asking you, how do you look at the Grenadines now looking into, say, setting up a larger hotel industry? We have in Canada, and we have a fairly large one, right? So I'm looking at the other islands, and I think it can go a long way, because the bigger hotels, I think people with like speedboat, lunch, and pleasure crafts can get like a walk, because in that the hotels will be right down in the Grenadines, and you have a lot of chain islands here and marine parks and so on. I'm looking at that development, but people will say that the people in Beckway are owners of these private guest house or hotels, do want those large development. But I think that was an old colonial thinking. I don't think these people were thinking of.
Shaka, could you allow Professor Robinson to respond to your question? Maybe you may wish to engage him after. But Professor Robinson, did you hear the question?
Yes. So I heard. So I guess he's asking. So the grenadines, I think, have always been, in many ways, the jewel in our crown. And I think Joel used an important term there, product differentiation. And I think it's something we really have to have top of mind. Tourism is a global industry. Greece. If people want sea and sand and other things, they can get that in a lot of places. What is different about your product? That product differentiation is absolutely important. And the grenadines has always been, to me, a classic example of the differentiated product. You don't really find it anywhere else. Well, it's hard to match. The grenadines is very appealing as a yachting type. And even being Antigua, I'm quite amazed at how large the yachting industry is here. And it sort of gave me a lot of reason to think about the extent to which we fully exploit that in our own grenadines and the range of services you can sell. Because when I engage the yacht people here, one of the first things they talk about is the grenadines, and it's almost like they Antigua offers them a lot of services, but they're really sailing down here to sail to the grenadines, and it's always giving me a lot of. So I think we have a lot more capacity to build out and extract what we can from that global yachting industry. And this is a segment of the market. P. John talked about global development. This is a segment of the market where their income levels are such that they have money to spend every year. They're not affected by the global recession ups and downs. Their pockets deep, deep. And even segueing back to the budget, I think it's very important that we get that capacity in Union Island back up in a resilient and quick manner, and that Union is not there as this place that like a storm just went through. Yeah, the hotel development, I'm not against it per se. I think the luxury resorts have their places, and if Beckway doesn't want that, Beckway is an interesting place. Whenever I go to Beckway, my family, the first thing they tell me when they bring some KFC, there's no KFC on Beck. And I find it interesting that Beckway has managed that. And that's fine in a certain sense, is that it gives them a brand. There are people who don't like the big developments, the big resort. They like that sort of stuff. And if they can do well on a brand, but I don't think that should stand in the way of luxury type products in different locations or different parts of Beckway, because there is a big market for that. Some tourists are really attracted to these resorts. I think for us, if investors engage us in that way, I think what we must ensure is that these resorts are built and operate in a sustainable manner. Because I think that has always been the critique, the damage to the environment, the way they operate. Because if we don't insist on that, then we could almost be killing the goose that laid the golden egg by having investments that undermine the brand. And if the brand is exclusivity, what is the brand? What is the grenadine selling? If the brand is exclusivity, then some of these big, large luxury brands products might not necessarily fit with the brand. So I think that's important. And in terms of the budget, That's how I kind of think of a budget, Cecil. What is the country's business plan? Where is the government trying to take the country, and how does it hang together as a coherent plan? What is the financing strategy behind it? Is it a coherent financing strategy? With the budget, I see a coherent strategy where the long term is investing in building up the tourism and hospitality sector on mainland St. Vincent, alongside the social investments, building up your human capital and the infrastructure in St. Vincent, and the emergency response to the barrel. I see a consistent, coherent plan there that this government has, this administration has been building on for a little while. The financing strategy is more government-led than I would generally like ideologically, but I also accept that St. Vincent entering into this tourism business relatively late. As a newcomer, the state probably has to take the risk. But what I would definitely like to see is, okay, what is your long-term fiscal strategy to get over this hump in debt that you are incurring as you try to implement your business plan? So I don't have any objection to the large hotels or whatever once they are environmentally sound, sustainable, but also that they are consistent with the brand we are trying to push for the Grenadines. Do they fit the brand? Because, BMW has a brand. There are things that BMW doesn't do. Because when you think of BMW, there are things that go with that brand. Toyota has its own particular brand. So what is our brand of tourism? What is the Grenadines brand? And that's a very important part of planning, that you can always get pulled in 1,001 directions, the budget, the strategic plan is a lot about discipline. What am I trying to do? And how do I build something that hangs together? You can't be in chapel and church at the same time, you can't. You can't be in and out,
Yeah, I think Bongo Chocolate, so he doesn't have a follow-up right now, but there's a message on WhatsApp, a question. Professor, he says, good morning, gentlemen. I would like to hear the professor's view on the idea of returning nationals who have contributed very little to the development of SVG in terms of nation building. And it has in bracket, service and taxes in bracket, given duty-free concessions upon their return home. There is no similar show of appreciation for the home-based retiree. What message does this send to the dedicated local nation builder? Professor Robinson?
Okay, well, so I guess I kind of try not, well, I always try not to be a hypocrite, so I will, my late close friend, Owen Arthur, I would have worked very closely with him when he crafted a similar set of policies for returning nationals to Barbados. I would be a hypocrite if I were to criticize or disown that policy. But what that policy really aims to do is to recognize that within our small island states, our diaspora is one of our critical potential resources. And the extent to which we can encourage persons to bring that capital and also importantly their expertise back to SVG, I see that as another significant potential driver of foreign exchange. These people are getting, let's say people are retired, they're getting their pensions. If we can incentivize them to relocate in St. Vincent in their retirement, and when they get that pension money, spend it in St. Vincent, I think that redounds to the benefit of the country. And one of the benefits that came out of that returning national program in Barbados was a significant boost to the construction sector as persons came back. It was also a significant boost to entertainment and some aspects of social services. Persons are coming back. They're accustomed to a certain lifestyle. So we found that persons were gyms, for example, exercise facilities, restaurants, and all these benefited from having persons who have been living abroad, returning with some income, coming in and spending that money locally, and so on. So I'm in support of it in terms of a mechanism for bringing that capital and, importantly, some of that expertise back to St. Vincent. So that's not a policy I am critical of at all. And I would be a hypocrite if I did, seeing that I was quite close to a similar one in Barbados.
But he's asking, shouldn't there be a similar expression of appreciation for home-based retirees?
In terms of...
But he's saying, what message does the policy that you explained a little while ago, what message does this give or send to dedicated local nation builders like Pigeon and Joel and myself?
What's our tax structure? I don't tend to support taxes on pensions, for example. I think people.
Good why? I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad that you said that.
I don't tend to support that. Persons have done their work, they've paid their taxes, they have done their time, and so I don't tend to support that. Or if you feel you have to get some revenue, there has to be something nominal, but I don't see that as a source. So something like that, I would certainly be open-minded too, in terms of really taxes on pensions and how you manage that, because it's those. I think people should enjoy those golden. Enjoy the golden years. Not necessarily about taxes, but I think they have done a lot already and would have paid. So if that's because sometimes behind somebody's general question is something specific they are thinking about. So I was sort of thinking about what would a local retiree qualify for that, because the returning persons normally get benefits in terms of duty free coming in and so on. The local, if they're repatriating their stuff and so on, but I certainly don't support pensions on retirees.
You mean taxes on
retirees' pensions?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we have a call at 9. Let's take this call. And we just missed this.
I wanted to just say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, on that same question to the thing, let's imagine that we have 1,000 returning nationals in St. Vincent, and based on their pension and some what they earn in the U.S., England, or wherever, and let's say on average they will bring 50,000 ISI per annum. That is $50 million that they're spending in St. Vincent every year.
Hold your hand. We'll come back to that. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. And you?
Okay. My name is Albert Oliver.
Hi, Albert. How are you going?
Not too bad.
All right. Good to hear you.
I am very impressed with Professor Robertson.
Professor Robinson, yes.
Yeah, Professor Robinson. And his conduct of how he's carrying out the program, especially dealing with the Grenadines. And I realized that he's the guy who traveled a lot around the Caribbean. And I think he made some very, very valuable contribution a while ago, talking about the development of the Grenadines. And for myself, traveling the world or of the Caribbean, we see where the big hotels, normally the people or the community do not benefit much from it. And the reason why I say that because the spending power for the buses, most of the buses, everything is all inclusive. Where you get 90% more from the yachties, it's really spread into the community. As you see, the restaurant, the bar, whatever, And it's very, I think this is time now, because of the hurricane that was passed in the Grenadines, we should see ourselves developing the Grenadines in the more yachting industry. I think Union Island should be a place now we could use the opportunity to actually put in another marina into Union Island, right? Because when you look at Grenada right there, Turku have one, and then you have a 4-5 in Grenada, right? And every time you go there, all those plenty yachts in all the marina, and you go show, and you see the hotels, the bars, So that whole economical philosophy actually go into the community, and the community now have more money. People in the community have more money to go into grocery, to go into the bars, go everywhere. So I think it is an opportunity now that you could develop the Grenadines as a really, really tourism destination, especially for the artists. Best way is a similar thing. And you go back with the expat, you go back to the foreign persons, intention who live abroad in England, America, Canada for years, and you try and come back home. The people and the business people get a very good spirit off from that because, as you say, there is restaurants and bars and hotels you will see they go because of a more upscale thing. I even people from St. Vincent go to Beckway, going to the restaurant, going to the bars. So I think this is a great opportunity. We must not get past to develop the Grenadines as the more tourism part. Yes, we have 1 or 2 hotels here, but I don't think we get much built off from them. Yes, we have a few workers. Yes, the government gets certain taxes, but for the local economy, I don't think that we get anything much from it. So that is my contribution. And Professor Robertson, you are from St. Vincent?
Yes, he is.
Right. So I think you should come back to St. Vincent, show your ideas out, help people out to actually move forward. Because all I'm saying to a lot of Vincent, we out there and we talk, but how do we develop our own? Right? Bringing the experience, bringing the knowledge, bringing everything that we can build our own, right?
No,
you will be able to come back.
But Olivier, I think Professor Robinson would speak for himself, but you need to know that he does give advice. He functions.
I know.
Yeah, right.
But I know I listen to him all the time, and he's a person with a lot of wisdom, and I think he could be able to come and actually help our persons develop business pattern that people could actually follow.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
It's a good contribution.
Yeah, very good. Professor Robinson, did you hear?
Yeah, I mean, interesting because sometimes there are things you don't think of. So, like at the campus here, we have a Center for Excellence in Oceanography and the Blue Economy. And it's really through interacting with the director of that center, I really began to develop a deep understanding of the breadth, the depth, the reach of the yachting industry here in Antigua. And maybe one of these Sundays or these days you should get Dr. Branson Bell, our director, because the range of things that, so we just put on a course in like deep sea welding, catering at artisan type people, Joel.
Yes.
Because these ships are there, these crafts are there. And the thing is, these fellas know how to weld, They do the work, but they are not certified. So people could pay them anything, you understand? But getting them certified in, operating craft, welding boats and so on. And it's a whole ecosystem that can really be seriously built out, huh?
it will be good to have Dr. Bell join our program at some time in the future.
I did.
I made a note.
So for example, one of the projects that we are writing up now as a proposal with the Saudi government is, Saudi Arabia, they generate a lot of oil. They want carbon credits. One of the things our center is researching, and we are writing a proposal from a business side based on the results. The seagrass in our seabed does a fantastic job of sequestering carbon. The Saudis can buy those carbon credits from us to offset their own, and we are so that again, that's whole blue economy. Antiguans eat conch like chicken, so there's a conch season. We are looking at a project to do conch farming, doing it in the ocean, and things like that. So, it'd be fantastic to have like Dr. Bell come on and talk about some of the projects. Plastics in the ocean, these are things we've never really measured in our waters, even on the environmental side. So I think that, and if we think of our island states, people always say we are small islands but big ocean states, because our marine space is bigger than our land space. So building out that marine environment is so critical. And don't lose Joel's point, about that 50 million, because there are a lot of Vincentians in the diaspora doing very, very well, and the extent to which we could get them to even spend part of their retirement time in St. Vincent because of incentives. I mean, just Friday, I had a meeting with a young Vincentian professor. A guy, Reynold Bailey. I think he's Helen Bailey's brother. I mean, this guy is a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology. I mean, I learned more about AI. This guy is very senior. I learned more about AI in the hour with that guy than I ever knew before. And this is a young Vincentian at the top of his game. He's a leader there. And so there are a lot of people out there. And that'd be an interesting guy as well, Cecil. Because
I think his father was involved in computers in St. Vincent, in the government department.
In the data processing.
Data processing, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to be relying on you to get access to these two.
I like in talking with him, there's something there are two things he said, Joel, that just stuck with me. He said with the AI, right? He said, but they're finding out how amazing human beings really are in our brain, because our brain, things that they're training AI to do, our brain does the same thing with less than 1% of the energy required to drive these AI machines, and I found that so it's like a simple example. Like, he's doing some work on that. They're trying to improve cameras, because cameras take these pictures, all these pixels. So I'm looking at you, Cecil. The chair behind you, right?
Yes.
The chair doesn't move. The chair is going to remain the same throughout the interview. So one of the things they're working on is having the cameras that once you take that picture of the chair, you don't need to take it every time, because that isn't going to move. The pictures of the camera should be focusing on you, because your expression might change. But you're saying, the human brain does that automatically, because I'm not looking at the chair. I will only look at that chair behind you if something lands on it or something, So, but again, these are the kind of people in the diaspora, who are at the top of their game, and anything we can do to get them to retire or spend part of their retirement in St. Vincent will be a big boost for us in terms of the human resources, as well as just the raw cash circulating in the economy. So I fully support that, but I take the point that the finance minister has no intent to treat the local retirees badly, so he has to find some some sweetener for the local retirees.
But yeah, those who pay taxes on the pension, maybe you can do something about the tax concession there.
All right. So just to remind you, Professor Robinson, I hope you don't mind if hope you don't mind working with me to have access to these two persons.
No, no, perfectly. I mean, well, Dr. Bell works with me here,
Okay.
and Bailey is actually he's due a sabbatical, and he's gonna be at the Five Islands campus for his sabbatical. So we are in touch with him. Like,
All right. So I will be in touch with you on having
well,
both of
there's
them.
just so much of our expertise that has gone abroad to develop themselves to the experts they are, but they're still very Vinci. They're still very connected to the island, their families, and the space. And it's to find spaces that they can contribute, because I think they are willing. I mean, Asquith Bailey reached out to me recently about bringing. I mean, he's at the top of his. He's at the top of his game in the IT industry, and he wants to train young Vincentians to have the opportunities like him and so on. So people want to contribute.
All right.
Former
I think
student of mine.
I'm seeing a call from Prime Minister. I think Prime Minister. Good morning.
Hi. Good afternoon,
Actually,
Cecil,
it's
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
and Justin and Joel and P. John.
Greetings.
I've been listening very, very carefully to what has been said, and it has, as always, with you guys and Professor Robinson, it has been a very good program dealing with some central issues. Before I comment on a couple of matters raised, I just want to tell Justin that the post-secondary and tertiary education, because I know that's the trade in which he's involved, principal at Five Islands campus in Antigua, that we have increased our expenditure from $30 million last year to $45 million this year. Broken down, it's a big jump, Justin. We have moved the number for the community college from $16.5 million to $23.5 million. And we have moved the sums for scholarships and the like from 22 million to 30 million. And of course, our contribution to UWI to the economic cost remains at 6.5 million. Now, when you take into account that for the hospital services, we spend about $47 million. For the police, a number similarly. But for post-secondary and university education, we're spending $45 million. And of course, in addition to that, there are other scholarships which we negotiate on a bilateral basis to Taiwan and Cuba and Venezuela, those which come up for the Commonwealth, the OAS, and so on and so forth. So you see the massive expansion in opportunities. And you and I have had a discussion about some particular programs tailored to our own needs. And I look forward to all the details. So I just want to make that point first of all. Okay, now this fits into what you have been speaking about, or in fact what you raised at the very beginning, that the most central aspect of a budget is for a government to outline what is the framework? What is the direction? Where is the country going? From where we have been moving and to where we're going. And clearly, as I've always been emphasizing, the colonial and amended colonial economy which existed in this country for 230 years, from 1763 towards the closing years of the 20th century, we had an economy based largely on unlimited supplies of cheap, low-priced labor. And if you have to shift the paradigm, the economic paradigm, to one which is based on unlimited supplies of educated, highly skilled labor, priced at a level in the comparative division of labor globally, regionally and globally, that you have to educate people and you have to train people. And a lot of the increase for the community college and the other programs outside of the particular numbers which I've just quoted to you to address technical, vocational education and training, the TVET programs at different levels. So I wanted to make that point, first of all. Secondly, in this altered economic paradigm, the economy has to be competitive. It can't be relying on subsidies at home, except in a particularly targeted area narrowly. And it can no longer rely on preferences in the external market, as you had with sugar and subsequently with bananas. Those are things of the past. So we have to compete with cost and quality, and naturally to produce the services in sufficient quantities for persons, the goods and services, for persons in the marketplace to come to us. Which means, among other things, in addition to the making the labor more efficient and to have higher wage, but in a context where that combined with advanced science and technology, certainly applied science and technology at a higher level, and you raise particularly the question of digital transformation. And just to point out that we have the matters on which you have been speaking, we have a program of $81 million which we are rolling out to cover the whole range of areas. To go paperless with customs, with income tax, across all the services where people line it up for. And also to do that digital transformation in respect of the transfer of real property, those transactions. To do away with these very long deeds, and we had to do the full cadastral survey and all the technical things involved. I mean, I don't want to go into all the technical areas, but just to say that that is something which we are doing, building upon the $80 million investments which we did in building out the internet backbone, which we ourselves had financed under the CASA program. And this one is a program which is adding on top of that. I don't know if you're familiar with the latter one. I know you would know about the former one.
Yeah, no. So I'm very pleased to hear about that one. I mean, I think building that capacity, and sometimes these things are not so visible to people in terms of the bottlenecks they can create, like the ability, like deeds and transferring property and really clearing these blockages in the economy, PM. Right? So I'm quite pleased to hear about that.
And one of the things which I took some time in dealing with is that I spoke about our economy and you and I have had discussions on this. Is one of a special kind. These island economies, with all our limitations and all our historical experiences, they have a very special kind, and we have to be searching always for hidden rationalities in our socioeconomic condition, which may be at variance with general theoretical postulates of the conventional traditional economics. And I was making the point that from our perspective, development depends not so much on finding optimal combinations for given resources and factors of production, as on calling forth and enlisting for developmental purposes resources and abilities that are hidden, scattered, or badly mobilized. And that is the way we build the Argyle International Airport. Clearly, I mean, for any investment, you have to have the capital output ratio and the returns, what you can have, and all the rest of it. But we have to look beneath in our own economies, in our societies, for resources and abilities that are hidden, scattered, or badly mobilized. Now, that latter factor in mobilizing the resources to institutions which are critical are our own institutions. When we're talking about material resources now, NIS and the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And people look a lot at what the central government does, and that's vital. But if you look at the advances made since 2001 with the NIS and the central and the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, persons would be absolutely amazed. I mean, if I would just give some broad numbers, which I have here, Cecil.
Sure.
You take Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In 2001, the total assets was 395 million. It's now 2.1 billion. Just in the loans and advances was 276 million. It's now nearly 940 million. And the total deposits have moved from 399 million in 2001 to 1.8 billion. Of course, the shareholders' equity of the bank has moved from 28 million to nearly 200 million. And the capital adequacy from just about 10-11% to over 20%. And the impaired loans as a percentage of total loans move from 14-15% to under 5%. So, and that is an institution which is critical for us. Well, we own 63% of it. I'm talking about the government. 43% by the government and 20% by the NIS, and of course the St. Lucian Finance Company owns 20%, and Vincentians, including the workers, own 17%. And NIS, because I believe you You used to be associated with the NIS in Barbados. Justin? Am I?
just
Yes, I was chairman for.
Fine. No. Justin, the asset base of the NIS in St. Vincent in 2001 was 218 million. It's now 524. We paid out just over 8 million in benefits in 2001. In 2000, we paid out last year 97 million. Our pensioners have moved from 2,900 to over 10,000. And the number of active employees registered from just over 30,000 to nearly 45,000. Joel, by the way, that is an indication in relation to the number of persons additionally who are employed, even though the population has remained basically stable. It's flat. No, so I think we have to look at some of the other institutions in the states. Performance of Vinlec, CWSA, what is happening at Argyle International Airport, national properties, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, there are some specific matters you raised in relation to the budget, if you permit me to say something about them. You're quite right that there are a couple of things which will drive the government expenditure. One is some bunched up capital expenditure items, like, for instance, the port, what's going to happen with the Annisville Acute Care Hospital. These are big ticket items. There are some others, but those are the two which jump out at you in addition to burial. But those things are necessary and desirable to be done. And in going forward, and if I may say this, one additional fund which is important to keep an eye on as to see what we're doing there is the 1% percentage point of the VAT which we put to the contingencies fund. Without our ability to take 50 million from the contingencies fund to help us immediately post-burial, there'd have been people starving on the road, which is part of building the resilience. In regard to the matter of what we are spending on climate and disaster response, the 2025 budget has over $200 million, which is a number knocking your head up around 27-28% of the capital budget. Well, nearly 1/3 of nearly 30% of the capital budget. It's a big number. But in addition to those numbers, I just want to give some others so persons would appreciate. The World Bank estimates that the loss and damage from burial is 875 million EC. The loss and damage from La Soufrière is 635 million, and 40 million from Hurricane Elsa. Our internal estimates are about 15% higher. But even if you take those numbers together, it means that with these three natural disasters, Soufrière, Elsa, and Beryl, that's $1.6 billion in loss and damage since 2021. which is more than half of the value of our entire national economy, which at the moment is close to 3.1 billion. But that is not Pigeon, just those bare data is what is facing us. And this is why I found it, out of a speech of 4 hours, the leader of the opposition spent totally 7 minutes on burial and climate change. He began his speech on Tuesday morning at 9:13 a.m. He got to burial at 11:26 a.m. and he was finished with burial and climate change at 11:33, 11:26 to 11:33, 7 minutes. Didn't say one thing about housing, and he made a try point that they're blaming everything on burial. Well, even nearly $1 billion in loss and damage, and 450 for housing. He didn't say one word about housing, and 7 minutes on burial and climate change. You're completely lost. But I give some further data. In October last year, the World Bank published a study, and I invite colleagues to look at it. It's called a Country Climate and Development Report, dealing with the 4 Windward Islands. And according to this document, St. Vincent and the Grenadines will lose 41% of its sandy beaches over the next 25 years. Funding minimum necessary adaptation through borrowings will increase our debt to GDP ratio by over 15 percentage points higher than the baseline scenarios. Let's picture that, colleagues. Our country will lose on an average, I'm still referencing this report by the World Bank, 3% of GDP per year due to floods and experience over $4 million annually in coastal damage. Losses to hurricanes, floods, heat, and diminished crop yields will exceed 25% of GDP by 2050. And up to 8 years after any major climate event, public debt to GDP ratios persistently remain significantly elevated due to the cost of disaster response. The report goes on stunningly to say, and I quote it, the total cost of implementing a limited core set of investments for physical infrastructure to build resilience to extreme hazards in St. Vincent and the Grenadines would be between $2 billion and $3 billion over the next 15 years. Then additional capital stock beyond this limited core of public sector infrastructure would increase the cost by a further $1.8 billion over the same period, the same 15-year period. Now, with all that kind of a problem, Joel, you have a man taking 7 minutes on that. And you have another MP telling you that spending 10 minutes on another MP from the opposition, spending 10 minutes as to why some clerical officer didn't pay for some eggs at Dumbarton. So the point which Professor Robbins is making our people have to lay out a strategic path as to where you're going, and to cut out this crap with these sorts of ignoring reality or spending time with a lot of minor things which don't affect in a very broad way what is taking place in our country and the challenges which we are facing and how we have to cope with them. Now, the question of the debt to GDP ratio is it concerns naturally the two things you say, the actual what the debt is used for and how effectively you implement the projects, and clearly the size of the GDP. You have to watch, and that is to the extent of the economic growth. But if you look at our debt profile, you will see that 90% of our debt is concessional loan. And that's why you see I had to fight so hard to have the World Bank back away from wanting to pit the poorest countries in the world against the most vulnerable by trying to tighten the conditions in lending money to places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because we are now we are a middle income country. That's how we are classified. And in terms of the Human Development Index, we are at the high level of Human Development Index. And our issue here is to see how we can break out of what is a middle income trap, where you can remain in that middle income trap without lifting yourself markedly above it, and you have to deal with it with investment, and you have to deal with technology, and how all those things are organized and combined in respect of implementing, which is the first of what you're saying.
Yeah, no, PM, and I think, Cecil, I think that's such a critical point about this middle income trap, huh? Which I think in a lot of ways is the big development challenge. You know, you start out as this poor country after independence or whatever, and then you get to a decent level of living, middle income, but then you get stuck there. And how do you break out of it? How do you move up to a next level? And that's the kind of thing I'm looking for when I look at a budget. What's your strategy to take the country to that next level? Because all of these OECS countries are facing this sort of middle income trap, which maybe PM is a fancy word, maybe for stagnating at a certain level. Huh?
Well, the thing is this. In the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, what complicates our developmental path is this. As I say, we have had to make the paradigm shift in a quarter century as to an economic frame which existed for 230 years. That's what we have been trying, Pigeon and Cecil and Joel.
Yeah.
No. Clearly, the wealth of the country has increased. More jobs are created. It's visible in front of you. Housing, for instance, you had less than 30,000 houses in 2001. Now you have 47,000 houses. You had under 8,000 vehicles on the road. Now you have 35,000. But in the paradigm shift, particular groups of persons have not been able to adapt themselves well enough in this particular paradigm shift. Therefore, the state has to help to hold their hands, and therefore to strengthen the social assistance, and to make sure that they don't slip into a condition where they may be most people moving forward, but some either stagnating or maybe slipping backwards. Even though the household income may go up, but particular persons in the household, generational to pigeon, may slip. And we have to watch that also. So when we're looking at the budget, I agree 100% with Justin. What road you're traveling, where you're going, and how you're making the change, you're making the transformation to lift yourself. We lift ourselves from a condition of subsistence equilibrium to one in which there are disequilibria, and we find ourselves at a higher level of equilibrium, which itself has to be disturbed to go an even higher level. And at every stage, you have multiple challenges and contradictions, and including those which are externally sourced, over which we do not have any control. Like, for instance, the vagaries of the contradictions in the dominant system of monopoly capitalism, the climate change issues, the issues of war and conflicts, which have a knock-on effect with all the disruptions and so forth. And we have to have a leadership, a direction, an organization at all levels throughout the state institutions and among all of our people to take advantage of all the opportunities, small and large. Take, for instance, you raise the matter of the price of a basic commodity like chicken. Well, part of the good news which I heard about 10 days ago from Saboto, we have given permission, and I'm talking the state, to bring your chicken from other sources, and to tell everybody they can go. For instance, the people who are bringing in chicken now from Brazil, and Joel, you probably know about that.
Yes, I do.
It's between 15 to 20% cheaper than the sources from which we have been getting it usually. Well, once that is reflected in the price in the supermarket, and I've been told the quality is a very good quality chicken, in fact, better than that which we have been having before. I don't know if you have been told that to Joel.
Yes.
And this is one area. And over the longer haul, on the fiscal side, we have to, and we do have, a frame for keeping the debt, keeping the public debt at manageable levels over the medium term. And we have as the aspiration to have it in the region of 60% by 2035. And actively we are working to that. There are several areas.
But Prime Minister, may I ask,
Yes,
based
sorry.
on what you just read there from the World Bank report, project for the next few years and so on, it doesn't seem as if you can get down to 60% by 2035.
Well, the point I want to make several points. A number of our investments, in which, for instance, we have a strategic goal of lifting the number of rooms, hotel rooms. Sandals employs 850 persons right now. That's because of Argyle International. And there are a whole set of chain of other things where thousands of jobs are created additionally, knock on. That's not just sandals, but there's a sandals effect. But it's knock on to other hotels and other touristic services. The taximen are doing well, to operators and so on and so forth. But the hotel which we want to be built, hopefully we'll start it by the middle of this month. The Marriott, which is another important
Of this year.
brand.
Middle of this year.
Middle of this year. We have a regional partner. We are alone not doing it. And those things are being finalized between Camilo and those within his ministry and with Carlos James, the Minister of Tourism, finalizing those things. And I'm kept informed and given my advice and direction and all the rest of it. Similarly, the port. The Attorney General is working on right now the formation of a company in which to put the port. And for us to take a bill to the Parliament for a regulatory body to regulate ports. Not to have the Port Authority being owner of ports and regulator of ports. Have the regulatory function done otherwise. But part of the changing the structure to put it in a company, Joel, if we can get 10, 15, 20, 30, 40% of the port being sold, having private sector involvement in the way in which we have the bank of St. Vincent and Grenadines, where we own 63% and other entities own 37%. You'll be able to reduce the extent of your indebtedness by equity capital coming up front from other sources. You see, Justin.
Yeah, because and that's something we spoke to earlier in the program about the importance of the potential divestment strategy after the state takes the initial lead, showing that entrepreneurship and really stepping ahead, which again is contrary to the conventional advice. But if we wait on an underdeveloped private sector, we would be stuck at a level of development. So it's very good to hear. It's important to hear about that interest in the divestment. So I think that's music to my ears.
The thing is this, but you do horses for courses, because you wouldn't do that for water. Neither would you do it for electricity, for the simple reason that a state-owned company is more likely to get low-cost price development loans for the development, for instance, in alternative energy. Because those entities, those companies, which are private sector companies in the region, electricity company, finding it difficult to attract low-cost capital to get away from oil. And some of the low-cost money you need to go way up in the bush and to have your water driven by gravity, your supply. You could get that from multilateral and bilateral sources in a way in which the private sector wouldn't be able to get that. So again, it's you have to look at horses for courses. I mean, we for instance, we don't want to run hotels. A partner comes into us out at Diamond with Holiday, and we will divest. But water is different.
PM?
Yeah.
PM, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on the emerging global environment, because I think I alluded earlier in the program. And when I say this, Joel, for me, it's a very practical thing. Eh? So, for example, even within, say, UWI, right? Our science and our getting a grant, a research grant from like the NIH, National Institute of Health in the US, or a USAID grant, has always been a big part of our strategy. And then now everybody is stepping back. We've had a notice saying all of these grants are on pause for the next 90 days.
Yes.
And so really now, I've been thinking about this for a while, that we are really moving into a phase now. And our old colleague, now retired PM, Figaro, was very provocative in his Arthur Lewis Memorial Lecture on Wednesday gone, and he was saying,
"This Mark?
Yeah, Mark, yes. He says that we are still clinging on totally to the dying hegemon and ignoring the rest of the world, where we really now need to be grappling with how do small states in St. Vincent that need multiple relationships, how do we really play in this multipolar world that is now upon us, whether we like it or not?"
Do you know what the leader of the opposition said? In relation to looking for money all about it? He said that it is shameful that I am going about begging. I had to point out that goal number 17 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which we signed on to in September 2015, enjoins developed countries to work out efficacious partnerships with developing countries in order to facilitate our further development, because it is in their interest. But in all the discussion which was going on by the opposition, for instance, in the budget debate, they didn't address the question of the revenue side of things. And on the capital side, I pointed out to them that if they look at the source for grants and soft loans for the budget 2025, they will find that the European Union is contributing to 2025 just over $5 million. That's all. And they will see the contribution, for instance, in grants from Taiwan, which is 30-something million, and 200-something million in soft loans. And they will see the large sum of money from the Saudi funds and monies which are there from other, what you may call, non-traditional sources. So that foreign policy becomes very critical for developmental purposes.
Yeah, absolutely critical. Joel, for me, it's not a theoretical thing. I run a campus where the funding to build out the campus is coming from the Saudi Development Fund. So we are now really in a multipolar world, and I think we have to pivot quite rapidly.
But what we have to appreciate is that while we are moving to a multipolar world, we are not yet there, and that there's a U.S. dominance is still in effect. So the world is changing. The old has not yet died, and the new one is in the process of being born. So it requires great skill and flexibility to find the spaces with that conundrum. You see the point I'm making there, Pijan?
Yes.
And some of the discussion which you hear. Let's take the building of roads. Let's just deal with what you pay for motor vehicle licenses, examining the vehicles, driver's licenses, all of those. That comes up only to $30 million in the budget, in revenue. 33-0. But roads are to be built. Over 5 years ago, we completed 8 miles of road from Hospital Road to the post office in Liu. That's 8 miles. It was $24 million. That's $3 million a mile. Now it's a number closer to $5 million. So what we collect for all of those things, for the on vehicles, can only build you at best 6-7 miles of road. You see I'm coming from there.
Although the only difference is that the what you collect on vehicles is what you collect annually, and hopefully the road will give you 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, except this, Joel. You have 80, 90 miles of highways, some 400 miles of feeder of secondary roads, and about 400 miles of feeder roads. That's the problem. And look, right now, a construction company stockpiled something up in Copeland Mountain to do the road for the farmers. They had a land slippage. All the materials are gone. But not only all the materials gone, but the land slippage with the materials broke the pipe. And I just got a report this morning. It's going to take them another couple of days. Hopefully by tomorrow morning, they may replace, they may be able to do the corrective work. It's over a big gorge. The week before, 2 weeks before, you might have heard me speaking about this. It was the time for the pipe which broke, the 12-inch pipe broke in the gorge up in Hermitage, which cut off North Leeward again from water. And you had to then incur costs to deliver water, which is not the efficient way to distribute water, while you have to do the repairs. And you have to look at, you're quite right about the importance of looking at the revenue side. But you have to have revenue proposals which connect to the real world and which are sustainable. For instance, this year we are going to collect $301 million in VAT. That's the estimate. And we have been doing fairly well with our estimates overall. I mean, take for instance, if I just give you, and I come back to the point I'm making, I have the draft, the preliminary turnout for last year. For current revenue, we had estimated to collect, that is to say, current and non-current revenue and revenue items which are not coming directly from taxes. You know, the non-tax revenue. And we had looked to collect $810 million. We collect 790, which is 2.5% below what we thought we'd collect. But it is 12.3% above what we collected in 2023. So I would say that's not bad for our budgeting process, Justin. Those are pretty good.
So those are quite good numbers, suggesting very effective tax administration. I mean, I think there's always scope to enhance that capacity to make sure we're getting maximum from existing revenue before we look at new sources. But yeah, but that's a very strong outturn, and I think the players involved in inland revenue really deserve their commendations.
But I will say at the same time, yeah, the opposition is that we must cut the VAT by 3 percentage points. Well, 3 out of 16 is about 19%. Call it the ease of reference. Almost. So you're talking about nearly $60 million. You'd lose on the VAT. And the rationale for that is that they say it will reduce prices in the supermarket. Well, that's a joke. Nowhere in which you have had this, without price controls, without an army of price control officers, can you get, and that's inefficient, you can't go back to that. It's not going to be passed on to the consumer. And that particular policy is based on a fallacy. Because the bulk of the inflation is not generated in the domestic, but it's imported. And all the analysis will show you that. So they're making a proposal to lose nearly $60 million without benefiting the people. But it's a mirage that it will benefit people. But it's nonsensical. The supermarket owners and the people in the wholesale and retail trades would laugh all the way to the bank. So this is why a discussion of the type which you are having on the radio today is so vital in order to raise levels of financial literacy, levels of literacy about the economy and the issues therein. What we have done thus far is absolutely remarkable. But the challenges ahead are immense and can only be addressed with some of the issues like what you're talking about, like what we have been talking about. I know when you're discussing revenue, you talk about how you have to target concessions. And some concessions, you have to have them in order to get the investments. And there are some other concessions which depend on the circumstances. For instance, we have a building boom going on right now. So we give duty-free concessions on heavy-duty equipment and on trucks to carry building materials, because that's the only way you're going to get the work done. What you call addressing one of the bottlenecks in the implementation. There's a problem of aggregate. You can't build roads and buildings without the aggregate. You can't have aggregate unless you have quarry, unless you have concrete batching plants and asphalt plants sufficient to produce for the market. And in those areas we have shortages. And we have to deal with those. And then there are bottlenecks in relation to a scarcity of labor. Because hot air doesn't build roads. Hot air doesn't build buildings. So that even when you mobilize the money, there are still bottlenecks, which is the bundle of things you put in on the Justin about the implementation issues. On Tuesday, I had a meeting with all the people in the state administration dealing with roads and buildings. This week, I'm going to organize a meeting with the contractors and with people from the state administration to deal with these bottlenecks. And they can hold you back. Though last year, we spent $460 million of the capital budget. It's the largest number. It's nearly $100 million more than 2023. And just by the way,
PM. I mean, that stat you gave there is key, because that's one of the things I look at, Cecil, when I look at the budget and the following year. How well is the government performing? Because I'm used to seeing budgets where you have big capital projects. They look fantastic, but when you come the next year, you realize half of what was planned wasn't spent. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. So again, I think that stat you gave there, PM, is very important, because as I say, it's an ambitious thing, so the capacity to execute on it is critical. So again, it's pleasing to hear that you're keeping a close eye on a metric like that. How much of the budget were you actually able to execute and spend? Because that's a critical test, really, of the effectiveness of implementation.
Well, we had just finished the budget. And I know that this is an important area. So I called everybody in the administration who has with these matters at a meeting. And this week I'm having contractors themselves. We need to have more capacity with the aggregate. We have to give people position who have big projects. Bring in your own aggregate. Dipcon sent me something to point out that when they have to import and the cost of it, the transport, the handling, and the taxes is 98% above what you generated locally. But if you want to have a quarry down in Richmond, you have people protesting when all the safeguards are in place. Protesting because of politics. So you're going to build the roads with what? Bottle stopper? Huh? Now the only area where I could help somebody with aggregate who want to bring it in is in the area of giving tax relief. You see what I mean, Joel? Targeted for a particular period of time. Not open-ended now. in order to get your capital projects done. And the cost of these things is just climbing. I am satisfied that a large number of persons who speak on the issues which you all have been talking about this morning have no sense of realism as to what is to be done, what is required to be done, and how you have to keep on top of things on an ongoing basis to make sure that things do get done. I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time this morning. I mean, there are more things we can talk about, but I should really leave.
Next time. But Prime Minister, this exchange has been very enriching,
Yes,
especially
yes.
with Professor Robinson in central to the discussion.
Yeah, no, I think it's very enriching. I think the PM has a lot more to say with his experience and his academic background experience in terms of how we navigate this current space globally. Because there is still a dominant U.S. power, as he says. And we are in their backyard, to use an old term. We share the bond of language. But there's a whole emerging environment, and even the U.S.'s approach to dealing with us. And I think it calls for a serious mindset around this and a lot of skill and experience in navigating this space. And I think the PM has a big role to play in this.
You take for instance, the U.S. authorities had approved through their armed forces $4 million to put some additional warehousing facilities and support for disasters, disaster preparedness in Canawan and in Union, and we are looking at the possible parcels of land. Canawan and Myro, sorry, because we have one in Union, particular parcels of land which we can use. But I don't know. I'm waiting to hear whether this ban, this ban for the time being on all foreign aid coming out of U.S. issued by Secretary of State Rubio, whether that applies to this. I know it applies generally, but there may be an exception for something like this.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. We certainly hope that there are some exceptions.
But your one for education, definitely there's a ban on that for the next 90 days.
NIH?
Yeah. I've been tracking every piece of information that I could get, every statement issued, because this means a few dollars and cents for us, or I had to go elsewhere. It's a period of real challenge, and those who are simplistic and who don't have an overall frame, and who don't appreciate what is taking place before our very eyes, are likely to end up in disaster. Very challenging period ahead. Requiring extraordinary leadership.
All right, Prime Minister, Professor Robinson, thanks for calling. Professor Robinson, as usual, we thank you very much for the discussion today, and we look forward, as usual, to having you on again sooner than later.
Yeah, thanks very much. Always a pleasure to engage. Seeing my old staff room member, Pijan, Joel from a long way back. So always a pleasure, gentlemen. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Our pleasure.
Okay, you too.
Okay, all the best to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all our followers and listeners, we thank you for being part of the program today, and especially those folks who have been tuned in via other media, Garfana Radio and Sarah FM. We thank you very much, and we wish you a very pleasant afternoon, the rest of it anyway. My name is Cecil Ryan. On behalf of Pijan and Joel and Kieran, we say bye-bye to you.